Hello, everyone. President Sunday here. Can you hear me? I'm completely deaf on my end, so I can't hear you today. So let me know if the audio is working. All right. So I've been informed by a number of you that the last political compass test I took was a bad one, and I have to say I'm inclined to agree. So on the recommendation of a handful of you guys, I'm going to be doing the PolitiScales, what is it, the eight-point test or something like that. But we'll just go through this again. If it goes by fast, and I have no reason to think that it will, because the last one took almost an hour. Granted, we weren't exactly zipping through it. If it goes quickly, maybe we'll try another one afterwards. Hey, does anybody know, just out of curiosity, if the academic agent's political compass test still exists? Maybe that would be fun. All right. If anybody knows if that's still a thing, let me know. And oh, it's just a meme? The last test was just a meme? Okay. It was bad. It was a really bad test. I don't know. It seemed like it was seriously put together. It just wasn't put together by serious people. But it seemed like it was trying to, like the questions were deeply flawed, but it seemed like they were trying to get at something real. But at any rate, let's get right into it, shall we? At any rate. Oh, I see what's happening. Okay, I have to stop doing that. Every single time I open the video on YouTube just to see how it looks, and I start talking over myself. All right, well, let's start the test. So, welcome to the PolitiScale, the online play. You'll be confronted to, that's a weird way to phrase that, to a series of affirmations. And for each of them, you'll have to click on the button which corresponds the most to your opinion. Okay, the writing on here is not boding well so far, so this better be good, guys. The questions assume that you are a citizen of a that's a weird spelling. Maybe I'm just an idiot, but I haven't seen that before. Of a multi-party political system and a market economy. Is there, who is not a citizen of a market economy? Hang on, wait. You're a citizen of a multi-party political system and market. You aren't a citizen of a political system or an economy. You are a citizen of a political community, whether it be a state or a polis or a city or what have you, and that takes part in a market economy, and that can have a multi-party political system, but that's not the same thing. Oh, this is going to be awful, isn't it? You can always avoid answering. Oh, this is good. You can always avoid answering a question, but if you do not understand the meaning of one of them, try to invert its meaning for a better understanding of what is implied. This test tries to represent the wider set of ideas. This test tries to represent the wider set of ideas as possible and contains some phrases that can be shocking, notably concerning racism and homosexuality. Well, we're warned. Let's go in. This is. I don't have a good feeling about this. Oh my God, this editing. The purpose of the judiciary system should be to punish those who went against the law. Well, it should be part of it. Sure, some would agree, I guess. It should be the sole purpose, though. So I guess this is going to be a repeat, isn't it? Okay, well, neutral. Excuse me. The filing and storage of personal records should be delimited strictly, and database cross-checking should be forbidden. What? The filing and storage of personal records should be delimited strictly. What does this mean, delimited strictly? Okay, so I think what they're going for here is, like, should governments be allowed to sort of create mass composites of information on the citizenry? Because that's the only way that this makes sense to me. I mean, why would database cross-checking be for? I can think of examples where database cross-checking in that instance would be bad. This is such a weird This is such a weird question. I'm neutral. This is revenues and capital should be taxed to redistribute wealth. Sure. Yeah, I think we should actually. Yeah, no, I don't have an issue with taxes. I do have an issue with how a lot of taxes are spent. I think there are a lot of positions in government. I mean, I'm speaking as a layman here, but there are a lot of positions in government that don't seem to merit the amount of money that goes into them as does. And yeah, but yeah, in principle, sure, absolutely. Sexual orientation is a social construct. Sexual orientation is a quality of an individual. Now, the concept of sexual orientation is a social construct, but I don't think sexual orientation by itself is a social construct. Now, I suppose it could be. I suppose you could be conditioned to have a certain sexual orientation by your society, or at the very least, to treat one as normal and one not normal. Like there are people who are sort of, for whatever reason, they're attracted to members of the same sex, for example, and they're conditioned by their society to be sort of repelled by the idea, despite having an inclination, and therefore they end up. Well, I don't know. Again, neutral or hesitant. Okay, let's think about this for a second. What are they fishing for here? Sexual orientation is a social construct. What is that? What are the 8 points? Hang on, let's just look this up quickly. What are the 8 points? I haven't done any research on this, so I'm just 8 values. Here we go. Oh, I see. Okay. So, right. So the 8 values are economic, equality versus markets, diplomatic, nation versus world, civil, liberty versus authority, and societal, tradition versus progress. What does the status of sexual orientation as a social construct or not have to do with any of these? That doesn't make sense. Maybe societal for tradition and progress. If the particular tradition in which you are a part includes strict understandings of what a proper sexual orientation is, but I mean, there are tons of traditional societies that don't really have that. So that's I fear this one might not be a whole lot better than the last one, guys. We need to make compromises with the opposition to apply our ideas. Well, sure, sometimes. This is just a sometimes. Some sectors or type of employment should be financially supported. What? As opposed to what? No? Should some types of employment not be is this meaning financially supported by the government? Yes, obviously. It is necessary to implement assemblies to ration our production to the consumers according to their needs. To implement assemblies to ration our production to the consumers according. Am I answering these wrong? Can somebody help me out? I'm just. I see Dilvani's in the chat. Hey, Dilvani, did you want to come on and just comment on this with me? Because maybe you can actually help me understand these questions, because these are bad. Okay, cool. I'll send you a link in Discord, okay, Dilvani? All right. Yeah, sorry. I saw that you had asked to come in yesterday, but I've just been so busy. All right. Well, let's. Okay. It is necessary to implement assemblies to ration our production to the consumers. Why is it? Did the person? Okay. Was this written by someone whose first language is English? That's my initial question, because like the grammar here is just all over the map. It is necessary to implement assemblies to ration. Or I don't even know what this means. Okay, so like first of all, I don't know who this is referring to. I don't know what our production refers to. Um, I don't know if this refers to the state in aggregate. I don't know if this refers to private companies. I don't know if this refers to sort of a um, what's the word? I lost the words on the tip of my tongue. Um, what's it called when the state takes full control over the economic life of the country? What is that called again? All right. Oh, no, you're not on yet. Yeah, Dilvani, just let me know when you're ready to go. Okay, I'm gonna say I don't know because it's underspecified, but I also don't like that I'm saying I don't know. So okay, look, it's important to sort of take account what your consumers need when you're producing and distributing goods. So I'll say somewhat agree. A good policy is a pragmatic policy without ideology. That's not necessarily true. You can make mistakes. You can have a pragmatically chosen policy that is misjudged and does more damage than an ideological policy. So neutral again, because this could go either way. And none of these, as far as I'm aware, like none. Okay, here's one. Here's one that actually sort of determines like your political orientation, at least to a minimal degree. Yeah, Dilvani, I sent you an invitation via Discord. So, okay, you're gonna be a few minutes. All right. So Dilvani will join us a bit later. Oh, 117 questions. Okay, we're gonna have to go a little bit faster. This is gonna take forever. It is acceptable that some industry sectors are private. Some would agree, sure. State-run companies should be managed like private ones and follow the logic of the market. Competition, profitability, absolutely not. Well, state-run companies. Okay, hang on. Okay, so state-run companies should be run by the companies in terms of competition, profitability, what have you, because they need to maximize their efficiency and their productivity. The state, well, okay, state-run companies. This is tricky. So, okay, so we want to distinguish here between state-run and state-owned, right? So state-owned companies would be presumably run by businessmen whose job is to by managers whose job is to run the company well. And so for them, competition, profitability, et cetera, these would be the primary things they'd be concerned with. The state itself should be running those companies or coordinating those companies to the end that the maximal good of the citizenry is achieved. Like that should be their goal. It can't be indifferent to the needs of its population on the grounds of competition or profitability. So I'm going to say yet again, neutral or hesitant, because it's not specific enough. In fact, I'm going to say rather disagree, because I'm going to sort of preempt what the the questioner is aiming at here, and that's that society should be generally run primarily oriented towards competition and profitability. So GMOs should be forbidden outside research and medical purposes. I'd rather disagree. Exploitation of fossil fuels is necessary. Right now it is, but is this like a statement of fact or a statement of, like, is this a prospective statement, or is this like, is this absolutely necessary going forward indefinitely, or is this just the case right now? Because it's definitely the case right now. But I'll say some would agree. Reduction of waste should be done by reducing production. It depends. Like, production of what? Conditions of life in jail should be greatly improved. Yes, depending on the jail. Yeah, I think as a general statement, it's probably true. Changes in an individual's way of life can induce changes in society. Some would agree. Dismissals of employees should be forbidden except if it is justified. Absolutely agree. Because that's almost by definition, right? If it's an unjustified dismissal, then it shouldn't happen. Okay. If two countries have similar economies, social systems, and environmental norms, then the free market between them has no negative impact. I don't know. That's a good question. Does anybody have any answers to this? I'd like to try to think this through somewhat. I don't want to take too long on all these questions because there's a lot of them, but I would like to sort of know what it is that I'm answering here. Oh, sorry, I'm just looking at the chat now. Lox Lobo says, "How are you doing, though?" I'm doing well, thank you. I'm very tired, but I'm on my day off, and I'm doing fairly well, fairly relaxed for a change. I think free trade is good. No conflict, no problem with trade. Yeah. So, like, I want to say somewhat. Okay, I don't want to say somewhat agree, but that also seems like the reasonable answer here. Because I don't know that just because two countries have similar economies, social systems, and environmental norms, that therefore the free market between them has no negative impact. And I think what's making me hesitant to answer this one is because my brain is couching this free market between them within a global market system. And so, yeah, I mean, if two countries have similar economies, social systems, and environmental norms, then trade between those in particular shouldn't be a problem. So I guess if it's bracketed specifically between them, then I think that's probably true. So I'll say somewhat agree. The fact that some schools and universities are private is not a problem. I think it is a problem. I think it is a problem for the very simple reason that it disincentivizes people of certain classes from basically assisting in the educations of poorer regions of their societies. And that's a problem because the government is largely made up of people of this particular class. So yeah, I think that is a problem. Now, there's some gray areas here in that, like, there are people, for example, who want their children to have a specific kind of cultural or religious education, and that's not available to them in the public schools. But I think I'm going to say somewhat agree, but the economic aspect is big. So I want to say absolutely agree if I'm not taking into account the fact that public schools don't offer sort of the range of religious or cultural diversity that may exist within a society, and that can cause frustration if it doesn't exist. So some would agree. That being said, I really don't want Ken Ham running a elementary school. Environmental norms should be influenced by mass consumption and not from an authority. Absolutely not. Absolutely not, for the reasons that mass consumption will, well, I mean, masses are indifferent to this largely. And yeah, so disagree. Now, I'm a bit ambivalent as to what kind of authority or to what extent of an authority would be appropriate in this case, but I'm going to say disagree. A language is defined by its users, not by scholars. It's kind of both, right? Like, language can be abused, and part of that, like, look, if you read like Aristotle's philosophy, for example, or like Aristotle's philosophical writings, especially his political writings, often his argument will work like this. He'll explain, this is what common usage of these terms is. Okay, we can derive from these common terms, this common usage of these terms, that therefore X, Y, and Z must be implied. And so here you have a scholar clarifying what the language of its common users implies, right? So the language in this case is defined by scholars and by its users. So I think this is a false dichotomy. So I'm going to say neutral or hesitant, even though I want to say absolutely disagree because I reject the dichotomy altogether. Citizens should take priority over foreigners. Depends, right? Depends on what you mean. It depends on what the stakes are. Now, if you're talking about, if you have I mean, we're in an international state system that is broken up into separate states whose responsibility is to their citizens, not to citizens of other states. That being said, foreigners can include people who are stateless, and often these people are stateless because of the activities of these other states, to which all the states are party because we all engage in the same in the same global network. So I'm going to say neutral or hesitant because, by the same token, there are inappropriate ways to prioritize foreigners over citizens. So, for example, if you have like, for example, in British Columbia, the housing market is really bad because people coming not just from overseas, also from other parts of Canada, but people coming from different places with lots of money are buying up all the houses and causing housing prices to shoot through the roof. And as a result, people who actually live here and who have no choice but to live here can't afford to actually own a home in their lifetime. So in that case, it would make sense to prioritize citizens over foreigners on humanitarian grounds alone. And of course, like if you're in a state of war, it's not really appropriate for a government to decide that because if fighting on behalf of the survival of its people would cause an overall larger aggregate of damage to the citizens of another country, of the country they're fighting against, and therefore they should just take it lying down. Right? So I'm going to say neutral or hesitant. But again, I have a feeling this is slotting me in somewhere that I don't agree to, just because of how the question's phrased. The maximum allowed hours in the legal work week should be increased. I don't know. Like, it depends, right? Like maybe somebody wants to work 60 hours a week or 70 hours a week, but maybe allowing somebody to work 70 hours a week allows employers to force employees to work 70 hours a week. And I think that the work week already is fairly unhealthy. I think people, especially in lower income jobs, are being worked half to death while they have children to care for, And yeah, so I'm going to say rather disagree, because I think on the whole, the cons outweigh the positives. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm clearing my throat so much. A couple months ago when I was working, I inhaled something, and my breathing has been weird ever since. It makes recording videos an absolute nightmare. I'm just gonna look at the chat quickly so I'm not ignoring you guys. I have this open in a different tab, so I can't see both at once. You can cause, deplorabology says you can cause real nasty social problems if you prioritize foreigners over citizens, especially when foreigners are not in need and if foreigners are given different rules to follow. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. Where it becomes tricky is when foreigners is like, for example, in the UK, there's a big debate right now over mass immigration and refugees, and that's being conflated with the Muslim communities in the UK generally, who are basically being characterized as foreigners, even if they're not. Like they've been incorporated into the state, right? Like at the point where you're a citizen, you're no longer a foreigner, at least legally. So it's yeah, like foreigner and citizen, these aren't antonyms, is the problem. And furthermore, citizens, like who is a citizen, can be applied. Well, the UK didn't accept refugees en masse, but the debate, the consequences of what's going on in Europe are definitely bleeding over. And you see the same thing in the States. Like one thing that I found really interesting was that, the debates over immigration between the UK and the United States, especially over the past 10 years, have really bled over into each other, so that you have people who are dealing with vastly different situations arguing about roughly the same thing in the same terms as if they were part of the same problem. But they're not. They're not even talking about the same kind of people. Or I should say the people from the same places. And care for a jelly baby. I too watched Doctor Who before it turned really bad. I actually can't stand Doctor Who, but what's his name? Tom Baker was mildly tolerable. Says we are not citizens in the UK. We are subjects. Well, you're also citizens though. But sure, I don't know if you're actually called subjects on paper. All right, let's get on with this. School should mostly teach our values, traditions, and fundamental knowledge. Did the distributors write this test? School should mostly teach our values. Okay, who's our? Values, traditions, and fundamental. I don't know what fundamental knowledge means. Like, is that like basic maths, or is that? Okay, so the our part is suspect. School should teach you how to think, and it should give you. School should teach you how to think, how to read, and how to be a responsible member of your community. And then later on, it should. Well, I mean, maybe not later on, maybe much earlier, but it should also sort of train you in some like basic useful skills, so you don't come out and you're absolutely useless. And it should probably also emphasize making you physically fit as well. I think personally, like, here's my hot take on the education system. I think that elementary schools should have at most 2 hours of actual academic instruction, and then the rest should be basically free roaming PE. Like, put out stuff that they can do, like craft works, or let them play sports or what have you, but let them all get really physically active and physically fit so that they're energized, and make the lectures and whatnot intense and short, because a child's attention span is short. And what you have a major problem with in the schools right now is you have kids underslept, going in at like 8 a.m. in the morning, if not earlier, and sitting down listening to these boring ass instructors for 6 some odd hours, maybe with like a 15-minute lunch break in the middle, or half an hour lunch break, depending on where you are. And then they go home and they have homework to do. And because they have homework to do, they don't sleep because they're spending the rest of their time getting in the recreational stuff they never did. They're zoned out during class. The classes themselves are incredibly unambitious and slow paced. So gifted students are bored out of their minds, and struggling students are stuck struggling for 6 consecutive hours. So it's kind of awful. I don't know how on earth this relates to this question, but I'm going to say disagree. Activists must always act in strict accordance with the law. Well, no. What if the law is unjust? Like, what if that's what they're acting against, right? Or what if the law is designed specifically to undermine activists who are contending with the law? Now, that being said, I don't think everything's therefore on the table. Like, bike lock guy is a big nay-nay as far as I'm concerned. That was, like, as far as I'm concerned, that was a professor, actually, appallingly, who tried to murder somebody indiscriminately in the street. So I'm going to say somewhat agree. I'm going to say neutral because, again, it begs too many questions. Deplorabology says misses the whole point of activism. Are you talking about the test or are you talking about me? The question. Got it. Okay, cool. We're good then. Activist, yeah. So neutral. Minimum levels of salary should be ensured to make sure that a worker can live of her/his work. I absolutely agree. Nuclear fission, when well maintained, is a good source of energy. Well, science fiction tells me it is. Does anybody have opinions on this? I'm not. This is such a weird question. Like, this is like how does this determine what? How does this determine your political orientation? We're gonna have to go faster soon because this is taking forever, but I don't know. Oh, right, it does let you. Okay. I'm taking too much time with this. It lets you say neutral or hesitant. My religion must be spread as widely as possible. I think my religion is spread as widely as possible, actually. Insurrection is necessary to deeply change society. Sometimes. Armed struggle in a country is sometimes necessary. Some would agree. Maintaining strong economic growth should be an objective for the government. Yeah, it should. Absolutely. That's a part and parcel of the well-being of its citizens. It is better to arrest someone potentially dangerous preventatively rather than taking the risk of having them committing a crime. No, we shouldn't be arresting people on the grounds that, in our judgment, they might commit a crime. Now, that being said, there are definitely certain kinds of behaviors that need intervention. So, I mean, how many times do you read in the news that this person who has been observed by neighbors for long periods of time to be displaying disturbing behavior, suddenly committing a murder or something, and just nobody did anything leading up to that, even though it probably could have been predicted by anybody with some common sense. So, no. That being said, I think some kind of proactive, I don't know what you'd call it, like social work or something. We need to be more attentive to the mental health of our neighbors and be able to do something about it. But it's a fine line between infringing on that person's autonomy as a human being, or a minimal level of their autonomy as a human being, and doing that. But that's gray. So I'm going to say neutral. I'm going to say negative. It says arrest. This is specifically oriented to crime. So Activism in existing political organizations is not relevant to change society. That's dumb. Of course it is. People of all political persuasions agree with that. Foreigners living in my country should be allowed to act politically. Stop that. Foreigners living in my country should be allowed to act politically equally to those who have the nationality. Who I guess they mean who are citizens, because having the nationality. Oh my God, why is my mouse doing that? Okay. I would say yes to a minimal extent. Foreigners living in the country who aren't citizens should not be able to vote. However, they should absolutely be allowed to demonstrate to a minimal degree, right? Now, that being like foreigners can mean different things. Does it mean people who have second homes living in the country as a luxury, or does it mean people who are stateless and don't really have a choice? Or does it mean people who rely on migration, for example, economically? So there are people who travel yearly for work. That's a big thing in, it's a big thing everywhere, but I actually took a seminar on that last year on Asian migration. That was really interesting. But they're actually relied upon. So for example, house cleaners in Hong Kong, they're almost always from places like Indonesia. And people in Hong Kong rely on these house cleaners because their work hours are tremendously difficult and their housing prices are tremendously high, which means that in order to function, a family with children often needs a maid or something. Otherwise, they don't have time to take care of their house or even their kids, because both parents are working to maintain their ridiculously expensive standard of living. So I'm going to say disagree, with the caveat that people who don't have citizenship, by definition, shouldn't be able to vote, because the definition of being a citizen today is that you can vote, right? So insofar as, like, for whatever reason, the law still identifies these people as not being a stable part of the community, I don't think that a vote is necessarily appropriate, just because it opens the door to abuse, first of all. But yeah, no. The state should be abolished. I have no idea. I mean, first of all, the state can't be abolished. Will the state be abolished? Maybe. I mean, what people, again, was sort of touched on in my last video. The last long form video on nation states. Oh, Delaney's here. Okay, cool. Sorry, I've been ignoring you. I don't hope you haven't been waiting long. Hello, Delaney. How are you?
Oh, hello, Mr. Sunday.
How long have you been in there?
A couple minutes, maybe like, I don't know, 3 or 4.
Okay.
I've just been reading the chat.
Okay, that's not too bad.
So.
Oh, good. I'm struggling to balance between the two of these.
Yeah, I realize I shouldn't come on and.
So, what do you think? Should the state?
Oh yeah, totally. Don't you see any of my content? Big abolish the state, but I don't want to influence any of your opinions because we're different. So.
Oh, you're not going to. Don't worry.
Yeah, obviously.
The state should be abolished. So.
Oh yeah, totally. Just absolute chaos. Good
neutral.
idea.
Well, look. Here's the thing, right?
Yeah.
How the state comes about is through a lot of really bad things. But now we find ourselves in the middle of a global pandemic, and these borders we've set up are really useful.
Oh yeah, so, definitely.
That being said, if we didn't have a state, we wouldn't have mass transit in the first. Well, I'm not sure if that's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of people say about ecology and stuff like that. The whole. We need maybe the state to have industrialism, but then is industrial society a good thing? It's like somebody a deep ecology would say. But yeah.
I'm going to say neutral.
Okay.
The right to be anonymous on internet should be guaranteed. Well, I agree with that clearly. Devaney, I think you might disagree.
No, I mean, you use anonymity to, I don't think you want people to, there's certain people like Nima, not the academic agent, sorry, who, clearly lost their anonymity, and that's really hurting them. So,
is it actually? Do you know what's going on there?
No, I have no idea.
Okay, I
Like I've
know
been like
the
trying to look into it, but I have no idea what's up with the academic
yeah
engagement.
me
I
too.
used to watch his stuff more, but I don't. I occasionally will watch some of his videos, but I'm not really that big into his.
His I mean I have no economic education whatsoever, so I find
Mhm.
some of his stuff a little bit useful just in terms of
Yeah, he
like
does
getting
like a lot of good
things through.
basics and stuff. Yeah, he did
Yeah,
a bunch of like little things like econ shots. They're actually pretty good because he's doing like a bunch of like historical examples of like economic
yeah.
like little stories, and those are kind of useful.
Well, I
Very good
imagine what he's
stuff.
doing in those. Oh, sorry. I imagine what he's doing in those cases is he's just he's like probably taking from like Sowell's Basic Economics or something, and he's just
Yeah.
condensing paragraphs, which is fine. I appreciate when people do that.
Sure. I mean, that's a very good thing, just regurgitating stuff you find and like putting it into a video. Yeah. I think he does a pretty good job. A lot of his content is just like he's taking Mises lectures and
Yeah.
rephrasing them into like, a flashy video where like, a professor who, does like Austrian economics would just sit there and, do a very dry read
Hmm.
of the subject. But yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna say somewhat agree because I think there are cases where it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, the labor market enslaves workers. I'd say it's probably true.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. We
I'm hesitant or maybe slightly disagree.
see.
I mean, it just depends. It's hard. Yeah.
It depends on what you mean by enslave, right? So if you mean by enslave, like if you mean by enslave that on paper or just
Mhm.
like in sort of a rigidly understood sense of consent that uh, labor workers
Yeah.
don't have a choice to labor or they will get whipped, let's say.
Yeah,
Um,
sure. Well, that's very
that's
direct slavery. Yeah, that's
yeah,
yeah.
but
But,
if you're talking about like the way in which especially like lower wage labor
mhm.
works is there's
Yes,
yeah, unless you get some kind of lucky break, it's very difficult to get out of.
sure.
Um,
Because it's not really accumulating any skills. You have to spend. I mean, it's quite. You don't have time to say. Let's just say like you're smart or something like that, and you want to go into maybe like IT, for example. You don't have time to build up skills. It's just like an example of something you
or energy,
very
like
tired. You're tired. Like, why would you have
yeah.
like when you get home from working a hard job, like you're exhausted, so you have no time to really do anything else, no time to read or learn anything, or yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. So I'm
So
gonna
yeah.
say I'm actually gonna say absolutely agree because it goes a bit farther than that, right? It says the
Mhm.
labor market enslaves workers. It doesn't say it enslaves all workers. So I think it's
Oh,
absolutely the case that it does. And furthermore, like the labor market itself relies upon like here's the thing
okay.
too. Like in Canada and the US, for example, we think of minimum wage workers as being sort of like
Hmm.
the closest thing to a slave class, let's say. But I mean
Yeah.
below that, um the
There's immigrants who work for even less and do like black market, gray market activities as well.
uh
But
there's immigrant workers, there
yeah.
are manufacturers in
Mhm.
like Asian countries that are paid
Yeah.
like pennies on the hour. Or I don't know if
Yeah.
that's accurate, but
I mean, there like a counter argument to that would be something like a lot of people who work those jobs are paid better than let's just say the alternatives, which might be like farm labor and stuff like that. Like even though there's like high suicide rates at some factories or there's like bad conditions, like some people argue that the conditions are better than let's just say working on like a farm where they might
well,
say most of the workers come from. That's like an argument against.
I remember a few years ago when I had this horrible Walmart job,
Yeah.
and it wasn't that horrible; it was just boring. But
Hmm.
they have like that stupid pep talk in the morning with all their employees, and
Yeah.
they'll yeah, and
Yeah.
our manager was like, okay, so today we're going to talk about integrity. You need to work with integrity.
Hmm.
We're surrounded by boxes stacked neck high,
Hmm.
labeled "Made in Bangladesh." The week in which that talk took place, a Walmart-owned factory in Bangladesh burned down, killing all the employees inside because the
Yeah.
doors were locked during their shift.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
There's no, just to clarify, there's like tons of examples of inhumanity where,
yeah,
just basically like, oh yeah, we don't want you leaving your shifts, we're gonna lock the doors. I mean, it's a similar thing with early 1900s with like, oh, they don't want the employees, going out, like smoking on their breaks, locking up and then factories catch on fire. That's something that happened like, more than 100 years ago in America, quite often. Yeah.
all right. Let's go to the
Um,
next one and see if this is more
yeah.
interesting. Loans, oh God. Loans contracted in the public sphere, state, regions, collectivities should not necessarily be refunded.
Um, I mean, there's a lot of consequences if the government doesn't pay back their loans. But
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm just wondering, is this supposed to be like what do they mean by the public sphere here, right? Um, like, do they mean between states?
Um,
I mean, I'm gonna say
well, I mean, like people borrow from private actors. I mean, most of the governments like sell bonds. That's
right.
mostly
Okay.
how they're funded. So I would assume that,
Okay.
yeah.
So I think rather disagree would be reasonable.
I don't think they have to be funded, but they're gonna, consequences. But
Yeah. Selfishness is the overriding drive in the human species, no matter the context. I disagree.
um, the problem always with this kind of very definitional. It's like I think everything is defined to
Yeah.
be selfishness, which is kind of hard.
Okay, fine. Yeah. So like,
Yeah, I tend to like it, but there's like it's like rationality. Like you have like well, some people don't appear to act rationally, so you have things like rational ignorance, rational irrationality, where you try to like explain irrational behavior. It's the same thing with like selfishness. It's like you have like altruistic selfishness and stuff like that. Yeah, like a Dawkins argument or something. That's like something you would get.
by the way, guys, Dilvani has a weird ass channel, but it's actually really clever. So give it a look. It's genuine. Like you got a weird aesthetic, but it's actually really clever when you actually pay attention to it.
Yeah.
It's just
That's very hard to get into. High bar, buried entry. Yeah.
No, but I think a lot of your analyses are actually generally really high quality.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Selfishness is the overriding drive in the human species, no matter the context. I'm going to say disagree, but I also don't know what they mean by selfishness. Like, are they including some BS like, well, all of these other motivations you could invoke? They're ultimately
to be rationally selfish. You want to help your family and your community, and giving like altruism is actually like secret selfish. Yeah, something you could say that.
I'm going to say disagree because screw that.
Yeah. Okay.
Foreigners enrich our culture. Depends on the foreigners.
Yeah, I guess it depends. But
if 1,000 Canadians went to England tomorrow, I don't think they would improve the culture very much. I'm just speaking from experience here. Don't.
You're saying Canada's a rotten country?
I think it's a boring country full of old people who want to die.
I see.
So some would agree, neutral or hesitant.
I'd say agree, but I think
borders should eventually be abolished, but they're so new. Didn't you guys watch my last video?
Yeah.
They are a new invention, and they're very, very useful. It's why they exist.
Oh, yeah. I'm pretty anti-border, but still, I think there's a lot of good reasons to keep them. Like, there's humanitarian reasons, like to make sure, things, trafficking doesn't flow or...
yeah. Well, I think, like borders are just a technology, right? Like they can be used badly. They can be used to exclude people of... Yeah. But they can also be used pragmatically in a very useful way. Like if, for example... all of the world states suddenly unified into one political community, we would still want to retain a lot of those borders because they allow you to regulate things, including as it's right now, like in a pandemic. So
exactly.
Rather disagree. Furthermore, I don't think they could be abolished.
Okay, that's
fine. They could be changed, though. Absolutely.
I made a video, and an example I used was that they price drugs lower in poorer countries. Because the idea is that you want to sell them cheaper to poorer people, but the problem is you can't allow people to export the drugs across the borders, otherwise it would break the difference. So
right, you're talking about legal drugs, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about like pharmaceuticals and stuff like that. Yeah, so borders do help allow poor countries to have access to drugs and stuff for cheaper prices. Yeah,
I'm just gonna get some water really quickly. I'll be right back.
Let's see what chat's up to.
All right.
Yeah. Probably shouldn't be talking as much. Let's just get through this because it's like
Oh, yeah,
less than halfway through. I'm like, just,
Yeah. Okay. All right.
okay, let's focus.
Social differences between ethnic groups cannot be explained by biology. I would agree. All sciences, even chemistry and biology, are not absolute and are subject to being shaped by our society. I would somewhat agree.
Yeah.
I would somewhat agree. Hormonal differences can explain some differences in individual characteristics between women and men.
I'd agree. Yeah.
I think to an extent, but yeah. I'm gonna say somewhat agree. The social roles of women and men can partly be explained by biological differences. Yes and no.
I mean, partly.
Like there, yeah. So I don't know. I'm okay with talking about these. I'm not in a rush to finish them. You don't feel any
Yeah.
obligation to stick around for the whole thing, though.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I was just more worried about like you because this is like 100. This is why I never do these tasks. They just take forever just sitting around.
I'm never doing one of these again. But I'm okay. It's specifying social roles.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that can be motivated by biological differences.
Sure.
But I'm gonna say
You can always find like historical examples where like you have the opposite. That's the
it says it can
thing.
be partly explained. Can partly
yeah, partly. So I mean, because of that, like let's find some degree. Yeah.
Nobody is by nature predisposed to criminality. I would agree to that because I don't think criminality is by nature.
I guess laws are social constructs. I guess that's the best way to put it. Yeah.
Not just laws, but the concept of
being a criminal.
Yeah,
exactly. Being a criminal. Yeah, of course. Sure. Yeah. That actually that's a good answer. I guess that makes sense. I didn't think about it exactly in that term way. But
yeah. The influence of religion should decrease.
I have no opinion on this.
I mean, I would imagine. Here's the thing: I can't imagine anybody who would be saying this. What they would have take its place is not in itself religiously motivated. Just because when you like, I really like. I've been really focused on sort of the historical emergence of politics, political categories from religion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so again, like all of these so-called secular, non-religious categories, they're all religious in orientation. So the influence of religion doesn't cease because people stop being "quote unquote" religious in a modern sense.
I mean, all of our historical foundations are, they are often traced back to people with religious intention. Yeah. So I mean, like I don't see any purpose of like, if that's what they mean by influence of religion, like originally these ideas historically came from a religious origin, therefore we should get rid of them. If that's what they mean, or I wonder if it means like more like a theocratic.
Oh, I doubt they're thinking about this that deeply. I guarantee you, if I put absolutely disagree, it would zoom me into the authoritarian religious categories. So I'm gonna say rather disagree. Abstinence should be preferred to contraception to preserve the true nature of the sexual act. I'm going to check out the Crowden project afterwards. I'm going to see if Dave's behind this. I'm going to say rather disagree. I'm not going to go into why.
Okay.
Banks should remain private. I have no opinion on this. Do you?
I tend to. I mean, like that's. I mean, like I guess would you want them to be run by the government? Probably not. That's like kind of states. It's like state socialism. If that's the alternative, I'd probably say agree. But if I was doing it,
okay, I'm going to say neutral, just because it's judging me. But
yeah.
Sabotage is legitimate under certain conditions. Of course it is.
Yeah.
Looking for one's own profit is healthy for the economy. Somewhat agree.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. The police should be armed. No, the police should be going in with their bare fists. I don't think the police should be walking around with rifles and in tanks. But I think they should be
It's
armed.
kind of like kind of almost like the military is rolling in. It's like a different.
Yeah.
The police should kind of be like I guess equals or with the citizen, not like.
I don't like how like the debates over whether or not we should abolish the police seem to be like
Yeah.
a zero-sum game. It's like we still need a city guard, right? Like we need people who
Yeah.
can, that's maybe a larpy way of putting it, but we still need people
Yeah.
who, in the event of a brawl or something, are equipped as like the official peacekeepers to
Yeah.
break that up. So I'm going to say somewhat agree, but I think the definition of police here is somewhat suspect. It is unfair to set a minimum penalty for an offense or a crime. I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think there should absolutely be minimum penalties for things like murder and rape and whatnot.
What is your what is your argument then for
What is my argument?
Yeah, what is your I'm actually just curious.
For what? For
wait, no, do you agree that this it's wait, so wait, sorry, what is your
Oh, I don't agree. It's not unfair. It's not unfair.
It's not unfair. Okay, so why isn't it unfair?
Well, it depends on the crime, right? But
Yeah.
I think for an offense or a crime. So this is a categorical statement. I disagree with it as a categorical statement. I think that there should absolutely be harsh minimal sentences for certain crimes. That being said, for things like petty theft or
Sure.
like things that you can sort of explain away by sort of
Yeah.
harsh circumstances, what have you, in a way that would
You're
make
saying that like murder, rape, those things are hard to explain by just mere like circumstantially. I just ended up, killing or raping someone. That's like not really a good.
killing. Okay,
not-
we do have a
quality
category.
argument.
We do have the category of negligent manslaughter. There's a reason why
Yeah.
negligent rape doesn't exist. So I'm going to
Sure.
say
Well, of
absolutely
course, yeah.
disagree. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Differences of treatment and quality of life in our society show that racism is still omnipresent. I don't think differences of treatment and quality of life by themselves show that racism is still omnipresent. I think racism is still heavily present, but I don't think that's the cause. I do think it's implicated in a lot of the differences of treatment and quality of life, but I don't think that's sufficient by in and of itself to prove that racism is omnipresent. And I don't think racism is omnipresent. I think it's just very present. Homosexuals should not be treated equally to heterosexuals with regard to marriage, filiation, adoption, or procreation. Absolutely disagree. Here's the thing with the marriage question is interesting. So when in Canada, I don't know, I'm sure this happened in the States too, but when in Canada, gay marriage was legalized. A lot of religious pastors gave up their marriage licenses, or their license to conduct marriages. They would still conduct ceremonies, but you would go through the government with respect to getting your license afterwards. I don't think there's anything wrong with people who have a religious issue with non-heterosexual unions doing their own thing. Here's the thing. The legalization of marriage, again, is fairly recent. It used to be entirely religious in origin, and the state would simply accept. Now, granted, it still didn't recognize same-sex marriages, but it recognized religious marriages that weren't necessarily conducted in the presence of like a state witness or via a contract. So this part of the question here is historically fairly unusual. This whole treatment aspect, right? Now, it may not recognize gay marriages in the first place, but now it does recognize marriages, period, like formally. So that's unusual. Well, no, and not
Sure.
not.
I mean, it has a lot to do with like taxes and encouraging, I guess, like procreation. Like historically, that was the point. Like you have like child tax credits and such.
Well, actually, that's the weird thing, though.
What's your opinion on that?
Not until very recently.
Well, that's very recent. Yeah.
But it wasn't for those reasons. Like it became useful for those reasons afterwards. But marriage became sort of embedded in a massive contractual system. First, as a way to actually exclude non-Christian marriages as a strategy to exclude non-Christian elites from entering into your community or from growing into your community. But
that's actually interesting.
Yeah, my last video goes a little bit into detail on that. I could do a longer video on that because it's actually really fascinating. But I'm going to say absolutely disagree.
Okay.
One is not Yeah.
I was gonna say pro-sodomite, confirmed. Just, there was a comment on one of your
Okay.
videos.
If Michael, what's his last name? If you timestamp that in, you're banned. One is not born, but rather becomes a woman. I don't know what that.
Wow.
You're like, I don't know. My niece was born 3 years ago, and she wasn't born a woman. So I'm gonna say I totally disagree. What a weird statement. Energy and transport structure should be a public matter. Absolutely agree.
The previous quote, it's like starts with like existentialist feminism, bourgeois, but it's kind of become taken on like a new meaning with like Judith Butler and kind
that
of
is
the
a
whole
quote, isn't
like
it?
queer. Yeah, it's from Judith Butler. Well, not Judith Butler, from bourgeois,
Bourgeois.
but Judith Butler reappropriated in her new, more like queer theory, which kind of became very important for like trans like thinking and stuff like that. So kind of how she formulated her thinking about like transgender people, like philosophically.
I haven't read much Judith Butler. Is that from Gender Trouble or?
Yeah, it's from Gender Trouble. That's like kind of her main thesis of Gender Trouble.
Okay, so maybe you'll have some insight into this. What am I assenting to if I say absolutely disagree?
But basically the idea is that like being a woman, I haven't read it in a while, but reading a woman is like this performative thing. So like people are kind of like taught how to be a woman, and like gender is like this performance. So essentially, like in theory, you could be like born with born like a man or something like that, and then become a woman later. That's like kind of the transgender. That's not, she doesn't make that argument explicitly in the text, but that's what a lot of transgender people get out of it. That's kind of the new meaning of that quote. But it's kind of like to be a woman is kind of like this thing it kind of happens based on just like the things that happen in your life, basically.
Okay, so to put this into plain language, is it correct to say then that sort of on this reading, a woman in this sense is a description of a set of social roles and not anything else. So you can basically be sort of
kind of, I mean, like it's everything. It's like there's some like biological aspects you could say, like maybe like we've come to associate like various different social roles, various different physical aspects, different fashion, various things like that. It's like it's like an aggregate of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna say neutral or hesitant because I'm claiming ignorance here.
Okay.
The fact that it's a literary quote of a book that I haven't read,
yeah,
makes it suspect, but screw it. Energy and transport structure should be a public matter. Absolutely agree. It is necessary to teach history in order to create a sense of belonging to the nation. I actually feel like if you teach history properly, you're going to have a strong sense of estrangement from your nation, because you're going to find out that your nation is a very recent invention that has very little to commend it as a unity. So on the opposite end, I really want people to teach history. So I'm going to say rather disagree with pains on the inside of me as I do so. Heavy penalties are efficient because they are dissuasive. Depends.
Sometimes, like if you penalize drugs, for example, oftentimes it just leads to people becoming more desperate. Things, you could just cause people to do other behavior because they're desperate to get something. Like if you cause drugs are illegal so their price increases massively, then they might be more desperate to do like criminal activities. So sometimes they don't actually work.
They don't. I'm also thinking like my brain immediately went, weirdly enough, to economic sanctions. So my history on this is fuzzy because it's been a few years since I read anything about this. But like during the insurrection in Iran or not the insurrection of Iran, sorry, prior to that, of what's his name, the guy before this guy who was taken up by the CIA coup.
Khomeini or
no before Khomeini.
Khomeini.
Is it no? Hang on, give me a sec.
Yeah, I don't know Iranian history too well, to be honest. Mossadegh, that's the guy who was deposed in the 50s.
Yeah.
He was the former prime minister.
My timeline here is tricky, so like taste with a grain of salt. But he nationalized Iranian oil, if I remember correctly, and then to punish him. I can't remember if it was Britain or if it was the U.S. who imposed heavy economic sanctions on them, with the result that they started integrating economically more with the Soviet Union. So it didn't have the result of deterring their action. It had the result of actually accelerating them in the opposite direction of where they wanted to go.
Sure.
I don't know why I'm bringing that up. It's obviously not relevant to the question.
More just that people will react to your, like, just dissuading someone doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get them to fall in line to stop doing it. They could just
that's also
integrate
true.
into a different system. Yes, that's
right.
what your
So
argument
you're challenging, like, they're not
Yeah.
necessarily efficient because they are dissuasive.
They could just turn to your enemies and get a deal with them. If you just kick them off, then they'll just go find somebody else. I brought up the example of like crime. Like if you make drugs hard to get into, then it could just cause people to do crime to get the drugs. But that's also another example. Like just dissuading people to be your friend could just make them side with your enemies. Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah,
going to
makes
say
sense.
neutral because it's too vague.
Yeah.
Market economy is optimal when it is not regulated. I'm going to say disagree. Technological progress must not change society too quickly. Neutral. I don't know.
That's probably a good answer.
It is important to encourage an agriculture that maintains a food biodiversity, even if the output is inferior. I have no idea.
Probably say disagree, but
Disagree?
I don't know. That's what I would say, because I think it just depends on how much you believe the hype about agriculture and stuff like that. Like, is agriculture sustainable? Like monoculture, essentially. I'm
Maybe,
just
but
not fully educated in ecology and agriculture.
It's an underspecified question, right? Because it doesn't
Yeah.
say it maintains food biodiversity for what. Like if it's just in isolation, it treats biodiversity as if it's a good by itself. But
Sure.
if it
Well, that's
has
what
an
ecology
inferior-
does as a study. Like they do, that kind of is one of the assumptions. Like biodiversity
is good.
is good, sort of. I don't, maybe not like in a moral sense, but generally it seems to be the implication of most, when people do, like people who study ecology, it seems like they generally think biodiversity is good.
Is that like a formal assumption in your opinion? Like from what you see?
I don't know. I need to actually study ecology. I just have,
Okay.
that's generally what I've picked up, but I've just not done enough. That's why I'm neutral. Maybe I'd say slightly disagree, but I just can't. I don't have enough education in that.
Yeah, if I take the question analytically, I don't have like a moral preference for biodiversity over superior output, so I want to say disagree. Since I don't know what's being attached to this, I'm going to say neutral or hesitant. It is necessary to massively invest in research to improve productivity. Sure.
Yeah, it's a fine. Yeah.
Preserving non-urban ecosystems is more important than creating jobs. Neutral. It depends.
Yeah, I mean, there's good reasons to have, like, preserve the environment and stuff. Not anti-environmentalist. Yeah. So, but it's not like we shouldn't like destroy. I don't notice I'm not on board with like.
No, like
society, yeah.
Like we don't want to be destitute, but we also don't want to be working mech jobs in Mordor. So
it's a good way of putting it.
Nowadays, employees are free to choose when signing a contract with their future employee. I mean, they're free to choose when signing a contract. They're not really free in anything else surrounding that. But I guess the bare act of picking up a pen and writing their name, they're free to do. So sure.
Yeah.
It is not acceptable. I mean, they're more free than any time in history, as far as I'm aware.
Sure, yeah.
It is not acceptable that human action should lead to the extinction of the species. I would agree. I mean, to a minimum.
It's the same thing with the other questions where, like, we don't necessarily like. It's like a jaguar. It's like we don't. I don't necessarily think like jaguars have in like absolute inherent value, but like it'd be bad to get rid of them. So yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
like,
the jaguars are kind of cool. We should keep jaguars.
I'm just saying, like, that's just any species, the fly.
Okay. Put that in the timestamp. Jaguars have no inherent value. That's the only important uptake of this conversation so far. Wait, was that not acceptable? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Hacking has a legitimate place in political struggle. Sure. Mm-hmm. Social assistance deters people from working. It can.
I mean, this is like something in economics that people say like welfare is like a dissuasion to work, which is kind of true. But the thing is that like it doesn't actually cause as much destruction as like libertarians would argue. Like, if you do the research, like the actual like effects of like giving people social assistance doesn't actually cause that much dissuasion for people to work. And it's also, if you're not earning that much money, how much actual damage is it causing? People argue it's much better just to help people, not have them struggle. Yeah.
I will say this. Like right now, I'm on my last month actually of CERB, so the Canadian government's sort of relief fund for COVID, because work's just tanked everywhere.
Sure. Yeah.
I've been working nonstop while I'm home on research on this. However, if I didn't have a decent education, if I wasn't like sort of made to be interested in anything except for like feeding myself and playing video games and whatnot, I wouldn't be doing that at all. I'd probably just be spending all of my time playing video games, staying at home, doing stuff I do for fun. And I don't think I'd have any incentive to go back to work if that money kept on coming in, because I don't like going to work and doing that. It's not fun. So, so I mean, yes, it does, but at the same time, it's like that's not the whole story.
I mean, the bigger question usually is, do we want to help people? Like, sure, like poor people, the bigger question is, sure, it might cause like them to be slightly less productive, but I think the bigger question is that if people are really struggling to get by, you might want to help them because they're struggling. I think that's the bigger moral.
Yeah, that was one of the things with this, is people were complaining. It's like, well, these people are these workers are getting paid more with their $2,000 a month benefit than they were when they were working, so they're not going to go back to work. It's like, okay, why don't you pay them a decent wage then? Like, we're not talking like a monumental increase in their earnings here. We're talking about like a McDonald's worker makes what, $13-12 an hour in BC right now. Like, give them 15 an hour. Don't put them in a humiliating outfit, and give them a reason to come in and try. But anyways, so I mean, sure, some would agree. Well, neutral, it depends. Justice should always take into consideration the context and the past of the condemned and adapt their penalty accordingly. Somewhat agree. It depends. I don't think a rapist / murderer should get off the hook because they had a harsh past. Sure.
Yeah. What was that thing I heard one time? A guy who's like 60, calling in. It's like, it all started with my mother when I was, or something,
Yeah. Well, this is one of the things. Yeah, this is one of this is a political thing in Canada actually, where you have certain indigenous, like this is a bit of a controversy here, where you have certain indigenous bands. Yeah, where you will have cases of rape taking place, but because they're allowed in certain cases to administer justice themselves, if they're, for example, liked members of the community or relatives of wealthy members, they'll have like a healing circle or something, and the person will basically get off scot-free. And furthermore, if their victim refuses to accept their reconciliation attempts, they themselves can be ostracized from their communities. So,
yeah, that's
the values of my
pretty immoral too.
The values of my country are superior to those of other countries. I mean, some, but this is saying, does this mean all other countries or just some other countries? Because I do think the values of Canada, however many their flaws, are better than Saudi Arabia's. So I'm going to say somewhat agree, but I know I'm going to regret.
But that's actually just your perspective. If you lived in Saudi Arabia, Mr. Sunday.
No, that's objective. I'm sorry.
I'm just fucking. I'm just fucking.
Canada is the shining city on the hill. Yes. We need to establish a monarchy to federate the people and preserve our sovereignty. What? This doesn't even make any sense.
Sounds like something NRX would be.
First of all, if we are establishing a monarchy, that makes the monarchy inherently democratic. Secondly, if the monarchy is federating the people to preserve our sovereignty, you're making sovereignty predicable of the people and not of the monarchy, which means, like, you already have this. This is the UK right now.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's arguing for. Never mind.
It's arguing for a rad trad society, basically. Yeah. So I'm going to say disagree. My country must pay for the damages caused by the crimes it committed in other countries. I'd somewhat agree.
What crimes? We haven't done anything wrong.
Well, kind of we have though, right?
Oh, what have we done? Well, you're Canadian, so.
Well, I'm Canadian, which is a colony of the British Empire, which
Mhm.
caused tremendous amounts of problems. Now,
It's true. Yeah.
that being said, I don't think like here's the question, right?
Okay.
Like, do I think that generations after need to pay themselves for the crimes of their ancestors as if they are guilty of them? No. Do I think that states that commit crimes have to or have a moral obligation to, and by crime here I mean immoral acts generally,
hmm
do they have a moral obligation to rectify those acts, those moral wrongs? Absolutely, I agree.
Sure.
Um, yeah, so I mean, like, I think that the continuity of the state isn't obviated by the fact that sort of the people populating the state change generationally. I think there's still a responsibility there,
Mm.
or at least an ethical responsibility. Excuse me. But at the same time, it's like I would say somewhat agree. I'd say somewhat agree. In some specific conditions, the death penalty is justified. I would absolutely agree.
I would say agree. Yeah.
Yeah. I do not have any problem if other official languages are added or replace the already official language in my country. Not really, no. I mean, it'd be annoying. But
I mean, yeah, it'd be annoying. I would oppose it because I like speaking English and I don't want to learn any other
yeah.
languages. But
Well, I guess okay. So
well, you actually have two languages. You have the French like took over, and we're like everyone has to learn French
French
now.
took over.
Basically, yeah, the French took over. They did a coup against the Canadian government, as I've read.
Okay, so like if
Yeah.
organically over time another language becomes predominant in Canada, I don't really have an
Mhm.
issue with that because I
Yeah.
don't think the things that I value are not inherent in the language itself.
Mhm.
I mean, there's beautiful things that have been done with the language that I care about, and I would like those things to be promulgated. But I don't have a moral issue with the language itself changing. That being said, it's talking about added or replaced as if like a governing structure is doing this intentionally. I would disagree with that. I think that's disruptive in a lot of bad ways. Biologically, human beings are designed for heterosexuality. I mean,
What is that? What is that question? I'm trying to think like exactly what the question means. I mean, I could see many situations where I'm like absolutely agree, but then other ways of phrasing it like disagree, I guess.
Well, in the sense that we're like sexually dimorphic, then
Yeah. I mean, like you need like for procreation, if like
so
yeah.
if by what is meant here is simply that biologically human beings are sexually dimorphic, yes. If what it means is
Yeah.
we're designed for heterosexuality, where heterosexuality is an orientation. Here's the thing: being
Yeah.
homosexual doesn't preclude you from reproducing with a member of the opposite sex.
Yeah. Often in history, tons of people who preferred the same sex still had children. So yeah.
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 Yeah. So I'm gonna say disagree because, well, I'm just gonna say disagree. I don't know what this is slotting me into though. That's what I'm worried about. I'm thinking at the meta level. I probably shouldn't.
More pro sodomite. It's just going to come up.
Wage labor is a form of theft from the worker by companies. I think it can be. I think there's a way to do it ethically. What do you think?
I mean, I tend to agree with like the idea that like, oh no, it's just a voluntary transaction. I mean, like there could be instances where it is like bad, where people are like forced into degrading situations.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting, actually. Again, Red, he
But people tend the traditional argument is that like companies. Oh, sorry.
No, finish your sentence. It's okay.
What are you gonna say?
I was gonna say
you have like wage labor and people make the company like the worker works and then the company like pays you less than the value of your labor. But that's kind of the traditional argument. But I tend to not really think about economics in that sense. Like wage labor doesn't have like an absolute value. Like it's like a trade where.
Well, yeah.
looking at
So
the neoclassical sense. But
I cited this book extensively in my last video on the nation state. Right, Hikamwangia's book, Indian Immigration and Empire, actually gives sort of a
mhm,
history of how, at least in a specific context, work contracts sort of evolved from being judged on the grounds of whether or not the return for the investment for the work was fair. So if the
mhm,
work you were exchanging and the conditions you were forced to endure as a consequence, as a part of your contract, were fair, and that would determine whether or not your contract was valid or not.
mhm,
Two, um, a reduction of uh, a valid contract being simply had the person signed it.
mm,
And so that's typically how we think of it today. So you actually can't really judge a contract in terms of fairness or not, because the conditions of fairness are determined to be today simply whether or
the
not
consensual. Yeah, was it
yes.
consensual? Basically, yeah.
Yeah, and consensual in a very minimal sense, meaning literally you lifted the pen and signed it, not taking into account all the other little pressures outside of that could themselves be manufactured, right?
Sure. Yeah,
Yeah. So I'm going to say somewhat agree, but not absolutely agree.
I'd be more towards the disagree, but I understand where you're coming from there. So yeah.
I'm not being influenced by your
Yeah.
decision. Just I'm
No, I'm just saying I understand where you're coming from. I'm just for the record, like I was just saying that yeah, like I did disavow President Sunday. No.
Do I want to be? I do want to be hesitant. I do want to be hesitant here. I'm going
Okay.
to be hesitant. That was my own decision. That was not Dolvani's influence.
I was like
It is-
confused. I was like, wait, are you like you said like I'm not influenced? I was like, oh, I was just stating for the record, I don't want to be called a pinko by the
You've
academic
already called me a
agent.
pinko.
No, I don't want to be accused of being I don't want to be wrapped in your pinko-ness.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't want me to ruin your public image. Okay, so it is a small group that consciously and secretly controls the world. But what do you think? Do you think the reptilians control the world? I mean, probably. Like, look, even when you like, the world is made up of small groups that try to control the world. I just don't know if like the
Sure.
if
I mean, there's probably a lot of small different groups acting individually that like it's like I believe in like rent seeking like groups, like various different elites that are like parasitites and like the public.
well, here's like
Yeah.
very very like gruggish take on this. Would you consider the U.S. government to be, relatively speaking, a small group that consciously and secretly controls the world? Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the United States has like like the various things like the Pentagon. The they have lots of power. You could also say possibly the Chinese Communist Party, like the upper. They
Yeah,
definitely have lots of power. I mean,
worry.
there definitely is conspiracies.
We know exactly what this is committing me to if I say I agree.
The thing is, like, I think I don't believe in like an app, like there's not like a group that has like absolute deterministic power. Like it's the same thing with like people who bring up manufactured consent. Like I think manufactured consent is real, but people kind of tend to assume that it's like this very like people have like a very grug interpretation where it's very like, the corporation just brainwashing everyone and we have almost no power and like it's a in that kind of sense. Like I don't think there's like an absolute.
Okay. I'm going to say absolutely disagree because I like that clarification you made. Nobody actually secretly controls the world, in fact.
Like an absolute control, yeah.
Yeah. No one should get rich from owning a business, housing, or land. Why wouldn't you be able to get rich from owning a business? I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well, it should, I guess. Yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it.
It's the housing or land part that's weird. It's like I'm also not like... Yeah, like I don't...
I could see people who have problems with like... living off rent from a land, because then the question is like, what did you contribute? Are you just a rent seeker, basically?
Yeah. So I'm going to say ambiguous just because these are three very different things.
Yeah.
Humans should neither eat nor exploit animals.
I agree with that, but that's my opinion.
What about the plants? You just don't care about the vegetables because they're ugly?
Well, the animals have to eat the vegetables. So it's just a matter of like least quantity of vegetables eaten. Like if you eat an animal, they had to eat vegetables.
I will say, like I would
just eating vegetables. Yeah.
I would vastly prefer that cute animals not be eaten in future, and definitely not. Like if you look at footage of how, like, I mean, this isn't like wake up, everybody. Like the way in which animals like pigs and whatnot are treated in slaughterhouses is insane.
I'm a vegetarian, but just for clarification on this one, that's why I would agree. But
yeah, I'm not a vegetarian, but I would.
Yeah.
I'm actually kind of inclined to say agree, but it's the should part. Like, is this a pragmatic or a moral thing? As a pragmatic thing, I think we should. As a moral thing, I think we shouldn't, if possible. But I'm going to say someone agree.
Okay.
The sacrifice of some. Sorry, what were we saying?
Oh, nothing. I was like, okay. I literally just said okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's what I thought. The sacrifice of some civil liberties is a necessity in order to be protected from terrorist acts. I mean, maybe.
Like in the abstract, yes, but the question is, I guess, like, should we have less, I guess, well, it's kind of like, I mean, in theory, yes, of course, like, you're going to need to have some sort of security measures, which, is going to restrain, if you want to have like a civilized, organized society. If that's like the goal, then you would want probably some security measures, but have we gone too far?
Well, okay, so are security measures necessarily the sacrifice? Like, what is a civil liberty in this case, right? Like, is a civil liberty the right to cross borders without paperwork? Because that was considered to be a fundamental liberty at one point.
Yeah.
Is a civil liberty the right to not get fingerprinted when you're going onto a plane? Like, that's different. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna say neutral, because again, like, this is propagandistic language. It doesn't make sense when you scrutinize it. I'm equally concerned about the inhabitants of my country and those of other countries. I'm going to be honest, I'm probably less concerned about the inhabitants of my country than those of other countries. But just because Canada is this gigantic...
We're Canadian, so...
Yeah. Are you also Canadian?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
I'm a true blue, red-blooded American.
I'm equally concerned with the inhabitants of my country. I don't care about anybody, I'm going to be honest.
I don't care about anybody. President Sunday.
I guess I'm ambiguous. Sorry, I'm neutral or hesitant about whether I'm equally concerned. Okay, that's emblematic of this channel, I think. Members of a nation or culture have some unchangeable characteristics that define them. Absolutely not. If you actually,
definitely.
If you read the history of any culture or nation, what have you, they are defined by a long trajectory of massive changes, which includes their emergence as fitting the concept of a nation that is itself not endemic to anything that we would call a nation or a culture, but one in particular. Multiculturalism is a threat to our society. I guess it's possible.
I mean, there's like... I mean, it just depends what you mean by that. So I could see like people coming into your, like, having other cultures come into your society, and then you have there's historical examples of like countries like having migration, and then it does get into actual conflict. But
I don't think it's multiculturalism simpliciter though, right? I think it's multiculturalism done badly. So where you allow, like
segmented factions, like Lebanon's an example of where it used to be majority Christian, but then slowly over time it became Muslim, and then there became a civil war, and then it kind of that's like an example of somebody would use to make the argument that multiculturalism is dangerous and bad.
Or if you allow, for example, economic disparities between incoming groups and existing groups, ghettoizations, and a lot of...
That's another example, yeah.
So I'm going to say, like, neutral or hesitant, because again, it depends. Is it done? This is a thing that can be done badly or well. It's also like, if by society we also mean like our political institution, well, multiculturalism can be sort of a bracketed component of that, in which case it's not a threat, it's a feature. So I'm going to say neutral. It is acceptable that there are rich and poor people. I would say somewhat agree, but I also am really concerned about the existence of super rich people who can basically sway
control society, can use their power to like degrade people. That's degradation.
So I'm going to say
Yeah.
some agree.
That's fair.
Transgender individuals will never really be of the gender they would like to be.
This is all you, Mr. Sunday.
Well, what do you think?
I mean, like,
Watch me lose half my subs.
this is like very contingent on like, I mean, like, you know, if we're gonna like have properly deconstruct this, like, what do you mean by like gender?
Well, how about this?
Yeah,
They're assuming the category of transgender individuals,
yeah,
but they're also saying following it's a variable whether or not they will be of the gender they would like to be in a perspective. That's a perspective
yeah.
forward-looking sentence. So
I
will
mean,
it become that gender? It
sure,
seems to me
but
that
definitionally, if you change your gender because you're transgender, then you're
well, I think maybe I'm wrong about this, but
yeah,
I always understood it as kind of like a recognition type thing, right? Like it's not
yeah,
you're assuming a new gender. It's that you're
sure, you're getting recognized. But that's kind of yeah. I mean, that's one of the points. I guess people, you know, they go through gender transition. It's I guess recognition as a member of a society as some sort of gender.
I'm gonna see if John
Um,
in the
so I
chat.
mean, like empirically, like there is tons of transgender people that just live as the other gender in terms of like social recognition. So in that sense, I'd probably say
Yeah.
we'll absolutely disagree, but because there's empirical examples where people, you know, just
Is Jalma still in the chat? Because this is their specialty.
yeah.
Oh, they're not.
Because some people then say like, oh, but you know, they're not exactly like equal, like cisgender, transgender, not exactly equal. So therefore, you know,
Yeah.
but I think in terms of social recognition, then empirically, if it's never, because never means that there's like, you know, it's like it's the opposite of like all. That's like the exact opposite. It's none. So empirically, there's some that have. There's at least some.
So
I don't think anybody disagrees with that. Yeah.
here's where I would actually have like maybe a potential problem with the wording of this question. So
Okay.
transgender individuals will never really be of the gender they would like to be. Like a transgender person is already of a gender in the first place, and I don't think they want to be. Now, there's the question about genders. Like genders are culturally specific and culturally sort of ensconced. Now, here's one: transgender individuals, can they be of the sex they would like to be? That's a bit more ambiguous, right?
Yeah.
Because like
gender is more of a social thing, while sex you'd assume that there was probably some specific biological category that, you know, you'd assume couldn't change, like genetics. The only argument against that would be that your sex is things that are actually created like hormonally. So theoretically, you could have somebody with like XY that develops like a womb just because of certain like hormonal things. So theoretically, you could actually medically change your sex, because your sex is actually just the manifestation of certain biological processes which are controlled like hormonally and chemically, basically.
Yeah,
that would be the argument against that position, which is
but the thing is, again, like gender properly understood, because like this is a term that's specifically invented to account for these ambiguities. It's not like something that's appropriated. Transgender individuals will never really be of the gender they'd like to be. Well, if gender is in fact social, then they absolutely can be. It's just a matter of assuming it. And then presumably also, this is where it gets a bit fuzzy for me, is there have to be like sort of reciprocation by the community, right? So it's I'm going to say rather disagree, because I think the question is poorly phrased.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I think empirically there is examples where people are recognized, and so I think if you're just saying, if it's just a matter of is there any, then yeah, that's fine. But I see what you're getting at. Yeah, cool.
I'm actually no. I think this is me being modest. I'm kind of actually like my innate response is I'm leaning here, but I'm sure.
No, I understand.
I disagree. So I'm going to say disagree, just because like my understanding of these terms just doesn't make sense. It is important that health should stay a public matter. Absolutely agree. Traditions should be questioned sometimes.
Yeah.
Don't touch Christmas, though. I like my presents.
The war on Christmas.
Order and authority. I got in trouble with my philosophy course union because I made a poster for the Christmas party with a picture of Bertrand Russell turned into the Grinch with a thing underneath. Come and join us in our come and join our fight, or come and join us in the war on Christmas, or something like that as a slogan. Yeah. The funny thing was I was the only religious person there, but they were all offended. Order and authority should be respected in all circumstances. Disagree, because that's a categorical statement. I don't think it should be respected
in all circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. If it says should be respected,
if there's a good, a lot of times, authority has I'm pretty much very anarchist libertarian, but still you have to concede in many circumstances. There's just authority structures that exist for good reason, and they shouldn't necessarily just be. It's just not necessarily the best idea too. Yeah.
I used to be on the idiot bandwagon of anarchism is stupid because we need social hierarchies and whatnot. And anarchism isn't, as far as I'm aware by anybody's theory, is understood to be the absence of any sort of seniority or hierarchical structure in communities. The point is, it's not a rigid sort of.
It's more of a question of are they an absolute kind of. It's the best way to put it.
Well, it's almost polemic. It's specifically directed towards existing hierarchies. It's not saying that hierarchies based on age and experience and competence and whatnot wouldn't actually exist, because obviously they would. In any kind of group endeavor, you'd have people.
Most anarchist thinkers, if you read Bakunin or something like that, he explicitly that's his thing. He's hierarchies of competence totally exist. If you go back and read the classical Bakunin, Emma Goldman, all those early anarchists. They I guess natural hierarchies versus what they would consider I don't know, it's a little bit complicated, but I guess you just generally don't recognize that hierarchies are absolute. You still ultimately take yourself as the center of decision making. Everything is still validated by the self, as opposed to saying that the self is subservient by nature under a hierarchy. Essentially, it's more of an absolute statement. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's more just saying that you don't have to subordinate yourself under a hierarchy. Yeah.
Dialectical vegan egoist asks, President Sunday, do you think an immigrant can ever become a quote unquote real American? Well, that's an interesting question. Last I checked, white people didn't come from the American continent, did they? So I'm going to say probably yes, if anybody can.
Got him.
All
right.
Okay, so absolutely disagree. Revolutions will always end up in a bad way. Well, so far, let's be honest, American Revolution didn't turn out too badly for a lot of Americans over time. English Revolution had some good things. I'm going to say neutral or hesitant, because this is okay, so do bad things stop happening because a revolution occurred? No. Right? Everything ends up in a bad way. That's the world we live in.
It just displaces, it kind of kills the absolutes that people take for granted, which is the state. And that throws everything into chaos and disarray. So, yeah.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to say rather disagree, because I don't like the prescription, but sexual assaults are partly caused by men's natural impulse.
What is your opinion on this Sunday?
If you're talking about the bare fact that men are motivated to commit sexual acts in the first place, I guess sure. I don't think that people make the decision to commit sexual assault solely because their biological urges are just too powerful. I think you still have responsibility at that point. I think it's.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a pretty vanilla response to this.
Well,
No.
it isn't just caused because men have sexual.
Sexual assaults are also
desires,
partly caused. They're partly caused by men having the physical capacity to commit them in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. I think that's what it's asking. It's sure, it does require, but then it also requires other probably things. It's not just.
Yeah, I think what it's asking is Like really, it's saying
Well, it's partly. Is it partly caused by men have a desire and ability to
to
commit the
rape
assault? Yeah.
specifically. I think it's saying
Yes,
like,
exactly.
do men have a natural impulse to commit sexual assault? I
So then I'd
don't.
have to say agree, but
You think that's the case?
well, I mean, like if like you're just saying like, I mean, if like men are like stronger and have like more of a sex drive,
Yeah, I don't think that necessarily
then
gets into sexual assault, right? Like
well,
that.
I'm just saying like that could I mean like that would have some, that would be a component. Maybe you could predict maybe that there might be
Right.
more naturally. Yeah.
But I mean, my point is like, sure, at some level of necessity,
Yeah.
like a sex drive is going to be implicated here, but so will their capacity to their need for air, right? So like, I don't.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to say disagree because I think what this is fishing for is whether or not I think that. I don't know.
Like men are just animals or something.
Well, I'm actually wondering if it's coming from, if this is angled towards like a traditional account where you need marriage to keep men in line. See what I'm saying?
There's a lot of, I could see like a feminist angle where it's like men are just like horny animals, but I could also see that where it's like you need to keep men like, you know, it's kind of like an anti-libertine thing. Yeah.
So I'm going to say rather disagree, which is not affirming the opposite, to be clear. Okay. It is merit that explains differences of wealth between two individuals. Absolutely not. It can,
not like deterministically, yeah.
It can in certain circumstances, but differences of wealth determines, largely just how much somebody has to fight against in order to actualize their potential. So, like, if you're poor, you probably have to travel longer to get to work. You probably have a harder job physically. You probably sleep on a less comfy bed. You probably live in a more cramped space. You probably have worse food, worse sleep, So there's a million reasons why, like, something that's not taken into account in these arguments a lot of the time is that people who are poor, when they go to work, they are about how many degrees sicker than people who aren't poor when they go to work.
Yeah.
So
there's
like, as a norm.
Yeah, I was reading this book recently called Poor Economics, and it was talking about how, like they're saying, like most, like in terms of adults, like the average adult, even like among poor countries, not necessarily that they're starving or getting improper nutrition, but it's partially because they might be eating the correct quantity, but they have things like diarrhea, which is causing lack of nutrition because they don't have access to clean water. It might also be children not getting the nutrients that they need, thus they don't develop properly according to what they potentially could be. There's a lot of like actual it kind of goes into like how basically living in a poor country without like, you know, infrastructure, having not access to, you know, the nutrition that you need as a child, like that pretty much like heavily like harms you in society, really. Yeah. Or just being able to be productive. What?
Jama Bayarn is back right when we finish all of the gender questions. Good timing.
Are they here or?
They're here now.
Oh no, they're in the chat. Oh.
They're in the chat,
yeah. Okay. That'd been cool for them to be here.
I invited them, but they're very busy today apparently. So
yeah, of course.
They're popping in and on and off in the chat. Right. So absolutely disagree. Mass strike is a good way to acquire new rights. Sometimes.
I don't think strikes. I think people tend to exaggerate.
Yeah.
The power of strikes in history.
Think so? I've got a fairly vanilla history of sort of the labor movement, so maybe you can enlighten me on this.
I don't have that much of a history, but it seems that like people have kind of did some like analysis that like most of the time labor, like especially back in the earlier years, like labor was very hard to organize in the sense that like most people weren't part of unions. The only times people were really part of unions were like during recessions when they had trouble finding work, which unions would help them, or during like wartime when the government mandated unions to, you know, control labor. Unions generally have a hard time, like, because, you know, if you think about it, like if like a rational, like individual thing, sure, it's good if you can collective bargain, but, you know, there's always like the scabs and people who come in to, you know, break things up. So it's very hard to get like it to work out now. Like we have like labor laws which protect unions now, so that now works. But I'm going to say it needs a lot of government protection and like labor rights to really make a union work. It's not something which
I think also this falls apart on the acquiring new rights part. So maybe initially it was successful in acquiring new rights for workers.
Sure.
I don't think it's a way to acquire new rights now. It seems to be it's arguing for improve conditions, and they're rarely met. So I think like
Sure.
yeah, recent history is bearing out they're not effective. So I'm going to say neutral just because I don't know. But marriage should be abolished. Absolutely disagree. First of all, what does that mean?
Big shruggy. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I'm going to say absolutely disagree. I don't know where.
What is marriage?
Yeah, I do think a lot of norms around marriage are really disturbing.
Yeah.
I'm not personally a big fan of the idea of a super conservative party of all your family members getting ready to celebrate the fact that you're having sex finally. But I can't be the only one who finds that weird.
It's kind of like a weird deconstruction of it, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to say absolutely disagree though, because I don't think in principle, I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't think it should be abolished. I don't like how it's.
I don't have any problems with marriage.
Yeah. We should always distance ourselves from protesters who use violence. Probably. I mean, to an extent, right? Like if you're, like it depends. Like if you're talking, there are appropriate times for violence. One of the appropriate times for violence is not at a free speech rally with a lock and a sock while you're wearing a mask and an employee of the university. Yeah. So I'm going to say neutral or hesitant.
I don't think destroying, like the whole thing with like, I don't think looting is a very good thing. It doesn't look good. It's kind of, I think just senseless destruction is not good. But then again, like I'm hesitant to say that like all violence, all destruction, like I think like it's the whole thing with there's the whole Minnesota protest going on right now. And I think like a lot of the whole like, oh, they're being violent. I think it's a little bit overblown. Like I think like, yeah, like some people should pay and some people should fear the might of the people. In that sense, like police shouldn't be able to do whatever they want.
My take on this is I don't consider the looters to be the protest. For the simple reason I don't think looting is protesting. I think looting is taking advantage of the fact that the police are temporarily sort of delegitimized, and so it looks really bad if they enforce the law in those cases. But I think the people who are doing that are just opportunistic.
A lot of protesters aren't looters. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of videos that people are kind of like very against that now. Like I've been seeing some videos people have been sending around where like protesters like beating up looters and like they're giving them to the police.
Sure. Well, I think furthermore, like I don't think the looters are protesters. I think the looters want to tell them.
Yeah, they just want to steal shit because. Yeah, that's a fair. I'm just saying.
Lego sets. I mean, I'd be the one with the Lego set. I'm going to be honest, but
yeah, you'd take advantage. You'd be like, well,
elections organized by the state cannot question the powers in place. Depends. Like you could have a clause in your constitution that allows for the constitution to be amended. Mm-hmm. So that's not necessarily true. That being said, it's often not the case. Transforming ecosystems durably to increase the quality of life of human beings is legitimate. Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, it's just like living in an industrial society.
Well, not necessarily, right? Like you can Well, you
could always do that, but yeah.
I mean that's like the most
just like farming or building a house or
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, animals transform their ecosystems. That's not a thing that humans
like build dams, stuff like that. Yeah,
build dams. Like their existence causes the atmosphere to change over time.
Sure.
It is legitimate for a country to intervene militarily to defend its economic interests. Depends.
I don't think it usually works out. It's usually kind of a net drain to go around and.
Well, not necessarily.
Like wars are very expensive to do. Like, I mean,
sure. Well, hang on. Like, military intervention doesn't necessarily mean going into war, right? It could just mean you're putting boots on the ground to make sure that you don't block the Strait of Hormuz or something.
Sure. I was just saying that it could go too far. Like being like too interventionist can obviously cost you more money than it's worth. But I think like if like a country is like unstable, like sending advisors or people to like or military people to go there and like make sure the country doesn't like
I guess
that's like people criticize like American intervention because America sends like advisors around the world to insist in various different things.
I think this part here, this defend its economic interests, I mean that's clearly pointed at the United States in particular.
Yeah,
and I think that's almost like I mean, I don't think there's nothing to this, but that's almost a conspiracy theory, right?
Sure.
Like they went to Iraq for the oil.
Well, there's like in South America, for example, like there's like examples where like you have a dictator who basically is like a left-wing government, and then the dictator, like, and there's like a reaction against the left-wing government, and a dictator rises up in the United States, sends advisors to like, guide and back the dictator because, the left-wing government was probably nationalizing American industries. And so they would prefer the new right-wing coup over the old left-wing government. It's like, that's kind of, I guess that's probably where I think that the question is, like, is that bad? You could say, like, did the America cause the left-wing government to fall apart? Some people who are very far left-wing would say, oh, all the things in Latin America were just America, like, undermining the legitimate people. And some other people would say, oh, well, actually, left-wing governments were very unpopular, and the far-right dictatorships were just a reaction against. So you could play it both ways. I think both sides have some merit, but that would be the arguments, I guess.
All right, let's go to the next one.
Okay.
I'm gonna say neutral. I'm gonna say neutral because I don't know. Violence against individuals is never productive. It can be.
Yeah, it can be.
I don't advocate it, but there are definitely cases where it can be. Assassinations are violence against individuals. That can be productive. Now, it can be productive of something bad. That's possible.
Sure. I mean, instrumental rationality. So.
Yeah, I think that's a better.
Yeah.
It can be useful. Is never.
It can be useful.
I don't know if productive is true. I'm going to say neutral.
Yeah.
People need to stand up for their ideals, even if it leads them to betray their country. Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I wouldn't necessarily count that as a betrayal of their country. Well, I mean, it depends, right? We tend to have a positive reading of this, but standing up for their ideals could mean a number of people with.
You could be like, I'm a Nazi and I need to stand up against the democratic ideals of my country. That could be. Yeah.
Yeah, and those ideals can be poorly motivated.
Sure.
Or ill motivated. So I'm going to say some would agree. Transhumanism will be beneficial because it will allow us to improve our capacities. No.
I mean, I kind of go both ways on it, but
yeah. I think technology will help us improve our capacities in some respects.
It could also be very dangerous. Yeah.
I don't think transhumanism is going to do any of that. Research produced by my country should not be available to other countries. What does Canada produce?
I guess the argument will be something like you have state-backed research. So the American government backs like universities, or your government backs universities, and the question is, should other countries be able to freeload off of the American R&D?
Wasn't it a Canadian university that was like sneaking? It was a professor. Maybe it was in the States, but I thought it was in Canada. A Canadian university where a professor was like sneaking coronavirus samples to China. Was that here?
I've heard a bunch of stuff about that.
Yeah,
I didn't look into that. That kind of seemed very conspiracy theory, but I heard that like the actual like the NSA like caught people trying to smuggle samples, and I was like,
years ago, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say rather disagree because I don't want to like. I'm assuming like if we think of the states, right? Like this assumes too much about like what kind of research your country is doing. Whether or not you're at the cutting edge or if you're playing catch up to some other country that's not sharing their research.
I mean, people have like criticisms of United States produces lots of innovations and spends lots of money, but China, just using its like efficient state socialist system, is able just to copy everything else that everyone spent all this resources and time to build up, even though China might not necessarily be as best at like developing new things. They're good at copying. So there's kind of that conflict of like, how should we allow China or these other, communist or not communist, maybe like authoritarian societies to benefit from all of our R&D spending?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna say rather disagree. Offshoring and outsourcing are necessary evils to improve production. They aren't necessary. You don't. I mean,
free trade and the, as they say, what is it? Comparative advantage. You know what I'm saying? My econ dudes in the chat.
Yeah.
I would just follow up on that. Maybe like, yeah, comparative advantage is real. So you can, different countries doing different industries.
Okay, so for the purpose of improving production,
Yeah.
yes, because it would probably result in a net decrease in production if you weren't to do that at all, just because things would be more
Sure.
expensive. Yeah.
There's some other like edge cases where I talked about that earlier with like some reasons to restrict things, such as like differences in income causing differences in poor countries not being able to afford drugs or something. Then in that case, maybe you should restrict. But
Jama says no, it's not necessary because you expand out the society. I actually don't have a strong opinion on this one. I'm going to say neutral. We should accept changes in our way of consuming food to limit the exploitation of nature. I don't have an issue with the exploitation of nature. I don't think nature is necessarily being abused by being exploited.
yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, there could be reasons why we don't want certain exploitations of nature. If it's
Sure.
like destructive, definitely often is like because nature isn't like it's like something that everyone has access to, but then some person can just come in and abuse our shared access. Nobody like owns nature. It's like
What this often
beautiful
never
and wild. Yeah.
Yeah. What these statements don't take into account is that you would have to restructure a whole lot more than just how we consume food in order to like changing how we consume food
Mm-hmm.
has wider ranging impacts than we all just eat soy now, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say neutral. I want to say rather disagree in terms of the question as it's written, and I'm saying neutral in terms of the more sensible thing that I think this is referencing.
I tend to have a much more like I try to have a much more like vegetarian, ecologically sustainable diet. So that's kind of like my bias. Like it's just how I live. Like I live. Yeah. That's kind of just how I eat. Like I'm like I consume soil and grain.
Well, I mean, if you're in an area and a situation where that's feasible, then sure. But I mean, not everybody.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say.
Well, I don't consume like I don't go to like what's it called? Those fucking. What's
like
that store
Foods.
that's like owned? I don't go to Whole Foods or anything like that. No, I just buy like like dried chickpeas or like really cheap ass.
No,
like
they're cheap.
like chickpeas, rice, stuff like that. It's like a bowl. That's like a big chunk of my diet. Just eating like rice, like very like.
Hummus is very filling and it's not expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally.
You can eat vegetarian.
Well, you can just I just buy like dried sacks of chickpeas and I like soak them like just like really cheap. Like like a lot of my diet is literally beans and rice.
And I will say this, like a lot of vegetarian meat substitutes where they try to fake are terrible.
Sure.
Vegan cuisine is actually often really creative and really good, which I've been surprised by. Except for
all
vegan.
That stuff is so expensive though, like mock meats and stuff like that. I try to limit my consumption of those because those are actually expensive and a lot of those are.
Yeah, and they're not.
Yeah.
They're not really good for you either.
They're not. Yeah, they're full of like all sorts of stuff. I usually just try to make like much more. Like I said, like literally my diet is mostly beans, curry, rice, stuff like that. Yeah.
We should so neutral. We must fight against global warming.
I guess, yeah. I mean,
it doesn't exist, so
it doesn't. Yeah, what are we fighting against? Yeah.
Euthanasia should be authorized.
Wait, is that spelled wrong? Authorized?
I think there's supposed to be a Z there. Somewhat. I'm neutral, but I somewhat agree. But it would be.
Wait, what is it saying? Like, what do they mean by author?
I think they mean legalized.
Okay, because I was going to say, I guess it would technically be legalized, but like, I guess, yeah, I guess.
Requiring authorization after being legalized, absolutely.
Yeah, like, should you see like a doctor or something like that?
Well, I don't think euthanasia should be authorized for people who are still functional. Like for myself, my father died of cancer a couple of years ago, and he, as far as now, it's a gray area, right? So he lost more or less his entire ability to communicate for about 24 hours before finally passing away. And during that time, we had no idea what kind of pain he was in. He couldn't take fluids. He was probably very uncomfortable if he was conscious at all. Now, that being said, if he was conscious, it's possible that there were some like very important emotional moments for him. Like he had his kids present and whatnot, things like that. So that's tricky.
Yeah, it is very tricky.
Yeah. Now, if for example, this was a person who was in like a massive car wreck and was looking at bleeding out slowly over the course of a few hours and was not going to be awake for any of it, I
Sure.
wouldn't necessarily have an issue with that and think it might actually be a mercy. I'm just wondering if euthanasia as a legal thing wouldn't cause more harm than good on aggregate.
The argument would be that it would just lead to lazy, it would just change the behavior. It's like, oh yeah, just euthanize. When if we didn't allow it, then it would lead to people being more like, it's like, well, no, we have to, like, every life is important. But from a utilitarian perspective, like, this is a big argument a lot of people have about like the healthcare system, is that like end of life care is really expensive. Like if you actually look into like American, the healthcare system, why it's really expensive, it's mostly just because like we have a lot more money that's spent towards like, well, it doesn't really have much to do. That's just one society.
I don't think we can think about this on those terms though.
I'm not saying like that's from a utilitarian. I don't necessarily agree that you should look at everything in a utilitarian perspective. Right. I'm just saying like some people do make those arguments like, oh, should we, be spending all this money for end of life care?
Yeah.
That's just a perspective. I just well, I mean, I'm not I don't agree with utilitarianism. I don't think it's a good way of looking at it.
I mean, abuses are rampant though. Like there was that was that in 2014? There was a Belgian woman, I think, who was euthanized because she was depressed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what the hell?
Yeah,
that's
there's a lot of people like that.
Whoever was
people who are just because it's not really like I think the system is pretty much like, if you just want to do it, you can do it. There's not really many restrictions. Yeah. If you want to be euthanized, you can just set up an appointment. Really, I don't think there's many checks in the Belgian system.
I would rather here's what I would rather. I would rather the courts basically have an attitude of leniency towards family members in explicit circumstances who give the okay for an excessive dose of painkiller or something like that.
I see.
I don't know if that's actually realistic, but like I don't like the idea of it being like a procedure.
Yeah. I understand where you're coming from. I don't really have a good opinion on this. I'm generally on the side of freedom, so that's like my bias. Yeah. But just like as a term of policy, like, it can lead to a lot of like just being a norm that is like accepted. Yeah, like that could lead to some serious things. So
okay, I'm gonna say gray on this one.
Yeah. I'm more just kind of like I'm just gonna put up both sides. Like that's how I'm approaching this conversation. Well, no, I mean like I could just be like, like people should be over the one. If I want to go die right now, I can die. I could just do go full libertarian.
Yeah, but at that point you're invoking other people, right? And you're requiring you're requiring a regulatory apparatus that is designed to basically triage people to termination.
Sure, yeah. Oh, no, I know it's more complicated than that, but I'm saying I could go like full I could play like my full I could just go full libertarian. I'm just saying that's like my bias where I would come to, or I could just be more thoughtful and say like, well, there's this and that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Space. We have to go to space. Yes.
You have to go to space. Okay.
It is necessary to avoid private monopoly. Depends.
I mean, some monopolies are not that bad. Like, there's obviously monopolies that can cause damage, but not every monopoly. I think like YouTube as a monopoly or like Google's monopoly has probably been a good thing for most people. I mean, like if you think about it, like monopolies have higher profits, and then thus they can invest more into research and development. We have access to like streaming, like free video. Yeah, like having like monopoly profits like do allow you to have more money spent into research and development and actually develop like really good products. Everyone uses YouTube. It's like a common platform.
Yeah.
That being said, YouTube doesn't like me, and most of my views come from like weird alternative websites. Like
YouTube doesn't like anybody whose channel isn't about cats.
Yeah. Well, I wear cat ears occasionally. It's like the meme basically. But yeah.
Send them a letter. I'm gonna say somewhat agree. Like I think in cases where it's like where a company squeezes out other people from the market to provide an service, absolutely. National show. Sorry, go on.
I was just saying the last one. I think that sometimes it's over exaggerated. The damage that monopolies do to I think monopolies do often like good things for society. That would be my.
Yeah. Okay.
That's where I come from. I think the bias tends to be very anti-monopoly.
Well, you made a good point about that.
Yeah.
In terms of like in specific domains, like in this case, the monopoly is the direct result of, is the direct cause of Google able to like have these features over its competitors
Yeah.
so readily available.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sorry.
Cool.
I'm thinking more in terms of like natural or essential resources.
Sure. Like, like one power plant, and then that's gouging everyone. Because
I'm gonna need to get some more water because I'm
Sure.
choking. Give me 1 second.
Let's see. What's the chat? Oh, it's Jalma Bjorn is in the chat. Hello, Jalma. Are you gonna come on my stream? I see you hyping me up there, calling me. I don't think this is right. Let's see. Oh, a lot of Dilvani is the greatest satirist of our age. Wow, singing my praise. Thank you, Jalma. The choice of passing away is a really complex issue. We tend to set the absolute conditions. Queenie. Oh.
All right. Okay, we're back.
Oh, hello, Mr. Sunday.
National chauvinism during sport competitions is not acceptable.
I don't care about sports. So.
I don't care about sports either. In fact, I think the national chauvinism is the only interesting part about it.
Yeah. I was like, why is it about sports competition? What does that have to do with politics?
I don't know. I think it's the nationalism thing, right? The categories women and men are social constructs that should be given up. No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I think like you could expand upon them. That might be interesting. But the idea of just like abolishing them, like that they exist. They're like some people, like very far left tapes. You say like we need to abolish gender, like gender abolitionists. I think they just assume that the categories are evil and bad.
Well, insofar as the categories are sort of thought badly, right? Like they're not well formulated, and they include things that really aren't predicable of people that we would otherwise treat as being properly a part of one or the other. Excuse me. I think there's something there. I think women and men, quote unquote, are indeed social constructs to an extent. But being a social construct doesn't mean something isn't real.
Oh yeah, totally. Obvious.
Yeah. So this is more for the benefit of the audience than for you.
Yeah. I think Jalma Bjorn is behind.
So I'm gonna say neutral.
Yeah, that's fair. I'd probably even say disagree, but
the main goal of a couple is to make at least one child. Says who? Who said that? That's rather disagree.
It could be.
I don't know. Like,
I'm not 100% sure. Like, are they asked like, is it like?
Is there a goal?
Should it or is it?
Like, if the goal is reproduction, like polygamy is a more effective way to do that, and that's not a couple, right? Like, if the goal was strictly maximizing procreation.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Yeah, patents should not exist. I have like an iffy thing with this. So I don't think someone should be able to steal and republish like stuff that you make. I think the way patent law works right now is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a very hard issue. I would say I would side on slightly agree, but it's a little bit more complicated. Because they do obviously protect groups. I think it definitely leads to a lot of bigger issues because it's basically implicitly setting up a monopoly. If you come up with something, then you hold a monopoly for a certain period of time on it. But the question is that good? Is that bad?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna say somewhat agree.
Yeah, that's probably where I would.
All right, final 6 or final 7. Sorry. individuals who get out of prison should be accompanied in their reinsertion. What does that mean? Can you help me out here?
I think like there should be services that like assist people. Like, you know, you should have like somebody who's like watching after you, like helping you get in. Like you should have like maybe like
reintegration into society kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe you should have like some sort of like counselor or whatever. That's just like after you get out the first couple of years, you know, you report to them, you check in, you know, they give you like a noogie, you know.
Yeah, that's eminently reasonable.
Yeah.
Changing the system radically is counterproductive. We should rather transform it progressively. Changing the system radically is probably incredibly difficult and unlikely.
Yeah.
The thing is, progressive change often gets out of hand, right? Like you.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah, so you lose sort of the directing will behind the progressive change as generations sort of fold and replace over time. So it's almost not even.
I mean, it's kind of a give or take. Like progress is not necessarily like guaranteed. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is something that was it like you know, you talk with the NRX people all the time. That's like one of their big things, like ooh, like progress or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is progress like determined? Like, are we just heading somewhere? Should we just skip there? Yeah, ASAP.
I think you should try to avoid having heroic goals politically.
Yeah.
In terms of like we're gonna make a big protest and we're going to restructure society into. Yeah, no.
Well, I think some people view it as like historically inevitable. I remember Zizek had this thing when he was talking about like in like in a fascist system, you know, people clap for the leader, but you know, in a Stalinist system, the leader claps for the people because the leader is fulfilling his historical, like, you know, he's just part of the historical machine. Stalin is just, you know, like he's just doing his historical duty to usher in communism. That was Zizek's.
I think people clap for Stalin. I think people clap for Stalin.
Well, I guess his more point was that Stalin claps for, you know, the people. That yeah, and he wasn't saying that people don't clap for Stalin. He was just saying that Stalin also claps along. That was his. Okay. Yeah. And he was, I don't know, you know, he's like he's like weird, but
I ordered a copy of before Euro Bureau of Literature started associating with people like Richard Spencer. I was going to go on a stream to talk about Zizek because they were talking about interesting political papers. I didn't realize sort of what I was getting into there, but
yeah, I watched a few of them, but yeah, that's the thing with like far right groups. Can't.
They're legitimately interesting, but they're into some really seedy stuff as well. So
yeah. Same thing with what's that dude, Zoltanis, who came on.
Oh God, did you hear about that? Oh,
yeah, you actually shared. You linked it to me, and I was like, I mean, I wasn't surprised because I liked his YouTube channel because it was a good archive. Like, just go if you want to say like, there's a bunch of like deleted or like banned content that I was like, oh yeah, well yeah, of course it's gone now. But like I for a while, and then I subscribed to him, and then he came and was like, oh, I watched some of your videos. He was on my Discord server, and we were chatting. He seemed like a nice dude, but obviously, you know,
obviously not.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can have like a pleasant conversation with somebody, but he's like, at the end of the day, you know, our ho, you know, our ho was, they, you know. So.
Okay, within a context, assuming you were of a certain description, I'm sure he's very pleasant.
Yeah, I mean, we had a pleasant conversation, but you know, if you look at that, the article.
Yeah. So for those who don't know, so Zoltanis is a YouTuber. Yeah. He didn't really make his own videos; he just compiled them on a channel.
Yeah, he was an archivist.
Yeah, but he was sort of embedded in a lot of right-wing groups, and he would ask them if he could like host their videos and things like that. And he came to me about that too at one point. And I said, sure, because I don't really care who hosts my videos. By the way, you're all free to host my videos if you want. I don't care about having monopoly on them. That being said, it came out a little bit later that on his Telegram, because he had a Telegram, he was a part of the National Guard for which state?
Ohio, and it was deployed to DC.
Right, and he was going.
Didn't have a National Guard, yeah.
Yeah, and he was talking about how he was excited because they were giving them live ammunition to.
And he went to do the racial holy war, Arhoba. Yeah.
Yeah,
that was that's the word he used. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he's gone now, and that's probably a good thing overall.
Yeah. But, just to clarify, when I said like he was pleasant, like I had the pleasant conversation, but you, of course, you can have pleasant conversations with people, but yeah, they're obviously like I don't support like obviously, of course, like I don't support that stuff. I'm just saying like it's very shocking though because like they'll come by and like, oh yeah, I liked your videos. Now I do my videos are like more like towards like very queer oriented. Like, I mean, you could have like a pleasant chat with these people, but obviously,
he's a person, right? He was able to function in society to a minimum.
Yeah, like he was a human being, and we had a pleasant interactions. But
unfortunately, he wanted to kill people, and he was really excited about that. So
yeah, that's really that's horrible and monstrous. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, just more of a warning about far right types is that you can have great relationships with them, but oftentimes like there's a serious monstrous side to them.
Yeah. No, it's like I'll talk to anybody. I think at the point where you start practically planning to hurt people physically is where I would draw the line.
Like there's a serious problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyways, moving on. It is necessary to remove. I just want to get this done now. I'm so tired. It is necessary to remove regulations. Thank you for sticking through this, by the way. I appreciate it.
Oh, no problem.
It is necessary to remove regulations and labor legislation to encourage firms to hire. I disagree. Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess you could say, like, well, if everyone's getting their arm chopped off in a factory thing, we'd have more jobs. I guess that's one. I don't think that's necessarily ideal. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like this kind of assume, and maybe I'm naive in this, but this kind of assumes something, right? Like this is assuming a status quo of labor regulation in which employers are not hiring more people.
Sure.
If you remove regulations, that may include things like being able to increase the number of workable hours.
Sure.
What have you. I don't see any reason why employees would necessarily hire more people under these circumstances. Maybe they'll just make more money squeezing more out of their current employees.
Sure. I mean, that's the so like there's cases where people like this is like something like you get in like basic like libertarian economics. They'll say like, oh, if raising the minimum wage doesn't actually increase like it doesn't actually help workers because it will cause more unemployment. But that's not even necessarily true. There's cases where firms they have an advantage essentially where they're like one of the only employers. Like if you're in like a low, maybe like there's one factory in the town or something like that. They're squeezing money out of them because they have very few places to work, especially if you're very poor and there's very limited places to work. Then you can actually get the opposite where safety regulations and minimum wage do actually protect workers. So I'm saying it's not as simple as like, oh, the free market will like, because regulations, they can help people. They can redistribute from one group to another. And if that's what if you want to help, though, there's definitely an argument even economically for that. Like the libertarians are not actually correct. They're totally, the economic consensus isn't that the free market solves everything. Yeah.
Also, Katsumi Kyoto asked if you and I have servers. We do.
I have a Discord server.
Jalma actually runs my server.
You can, if you want to join my server, you just look up my YouTube channel, Dilvany the Goddess. On YouTube.
I'll put a link in the description to your.
Okay,
I can put a link to your Discord too if you want, if you're comfortable with that.
Sure, yeah. I have my Discord link for my YouTube channel, so it's just like in any of my descriptions of any of my videos, you can find it. But yeah, you can join my.
And Dilvany's actually got some really interesting takes on things, so I would give her channel a look for anybody there, and I'll leave a link to that as well in the description. Just
say you're from the President Sunday stream because I keep my server on lockdown, and I'll let you in. So.
Mine's on lockdown too. NRX was nuked apparently. So
let's talk about that. I don't know what you meant by that. I was like, what do you mean Sunday?
As in Endeavor and Distributist. And actually, it was apparently more than just Endeavor. So Endeavor posted on Twitter yesterday, I think, that his entire server, which is NRX, was like 500 or so people, was just deleted. His account was banned. The Distributist account was banned. Like 157 from the Cana Society were banned.
Yeah.
Closington's account was banned, so his server is now headless. I have no idea what happened.
I just want to say, everyone, be careful what servers you join. I'm pretty sure when my first Discord account got banned, I'm pretty sure it was because I was like hanging out with some like alt-right types back in the day. I'm 99% sure about like hanging around because they just banned almost everyone in the server.
It's not really that they hung around you more like, wasn't it?
No, I was in some of their servers. Like people invited. They were like, "Oh, Delani's cool. We'll invite her to our servers." Back in the day, like there was some of that. Like, it's not that I agree with him. I was just more like, I was just
Yeah.
curious, and I was just like,
Well,
it's more just like
apparently the old,
voyeurism, I would say.
apparently apparently the old deep lore was also nuked.
Yeah. Well, they banned me because, for being a leftist.
Oh, a distributor. Bluff asks, Distributus was banned from where? Distributus' Discord account was banned, so he's gone from there permanently. Apparently, they've given up. They're just not going to go back on.
Yeah, I mean that happened before. Yeah.
Yeah, it's happened a few times, I think, but I don't know why exactly. The fact that it was all those three at once tells me they were probably on a list for some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, so let's. Yeah, so check out Delvani's channel. It's actually got some really interesting stuff on it, and our servers. I don't know if your server's on lockdown. My server's on lockdown right now. It probably won't.
Well, it's not. When I say it's on lockdown, like I have like when you join my server, I have like an area called the slums, which has like something called the epic free speech zone where you just do whatever you want. But then I have like the actual like serious channels where like
Yeah, I'm talking with my mods, which includes Delvani, by the way.
Yes.
About maybe making like sort of a tiered thing where we have like sort of an inner sanctum Discord, and then we have sort of the regular Discord for more open stuff. That's
how I do it. So
yeah, we do police it fairly heavily for certain kinds of things, but generally it's a pretty open place for discussion. So I think
same with my server. So
yeah, we'll probably put in like a vetting area soon, just so people can get in if they want to, because right now it's completely closed off. But yeah, we'll probably open it up more in the future. Let's finish this off.
Anyway, yeah, we're so close.
Get this done. This is like how long we've been going for? Over 2 hours. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Okay, let's do this.
Sometimes it is this question. Sometimes I think it is. Some regulations might be 2, but often regulations exist for.
Yeah. Okay. Just because I can see it being pragmatically the case, I'm going to say yes.
Yeah.
The age of retirement should be lowered. I
have no opinions on this.
Depends on where you are. I think that I don't think people should be working in Walmart until they're 70, but
I mean, some people do that for healthcare. Yeah,
I think people should be able to retire. Yeah, I somewhat agree.
Yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, okay, sorry, I didn't cut you off.
Yeah, it's okay. Go on.
I was going to say some people like because Walmart has like if you work there, you can also get like Walmart healthcare. In America, we don't have a state healthcare, so a lot of elderly people. They work to get like some sort of extra, like they maybe get like an extra money to supplement their social security, or maybe they want to get like private Walmart healthcare because it covers something that the public retirement healthcare doesn't cover to supplement theirs, like their Medicare. Essentially, that's how the American system works.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be other reasons why old people are working.
Yeah, abortion should be limited to specific cases. I somewhat agree.
I'm generally not very pro-abortion, can be honest. But
I don't think anyone's really pro-abortion, but I am.
Well, yeah.
I don't. Yeah, I don't.
Well, some people, some very like cringy left-wing people are like, yeah, woohoo, abortion. Some
exactly.
There's some people who do that. Yeah.
Yeah, that disturbs me.
It is very disturbing.
I at the very least would like it if people took it a bit more soberly what they're doing, because it is potentially doing something very serious. I don't think it should be banned. So I'm going to say somewhat agree.
Yeah.
A good citizen is a patriot. I don't think so. I think that assumes that you're a citizen of a country, but you're not a citizen of a country or a culture. You're a citizen of a state, which is different.
Oh.
Yeah. So disagree. Prisons should no longer exist. Disagree.
Okay.
Yep. That's that. Okay, here we are.
Pinko.
Not again. Oh, it's even pink too. God.
Yeah. President Sunday is a pinko. I tried to, I was here, I was making the case against pinkoism. So
why am I a communist? Nothing I said in okay, this is putting capitalism and communism on a spectrum. They aren't degrees.
Yeah. I mean, you did make the pro regulation, you did like on some of those things like is wage labor theft. Like you were like, well, you did say like slightly agree or something like that. So enough of that will put you like into a moderate communist.
I do seem to be like majority gray area.
Yeah, you're definitely a centrist. But you're a communist centrist.
Never having you on again. Well, here we go. Okay.
Never happened.
Additional characteristics. Veganism.
Oh, I think you just said like you slightly agree that you shouldn't take it exploit animals.
All right. Well,
My favorite test is like 30 questions. I have to do that sometimes.
no. Oh, is it only 30
It's
questions?
only like 30. It's literally only 30
I
questions.
swear to God, if that
It's
ends
like
up,
so amazing. And look, literally, it just like matches you with an ideology. So
if
it
that
just
ends
says
up
like,
being like 30 categories of questions,
no, it's literally just 30 single
Okay.
questions. It's like agree, disagree, and like it matches you with an ideology. So it'll say like, oh, you're like you're a neoliberal, or you're an anarcho-communist, or you're a Democrat. It'll literally just match you, or like you're a liberal feminist. It'll literally just match you with which ones you agree with. It's great. It's called the political sextant. It's like actually like good because it doesn't like say, oh, you're like more constructivist versus essentialist. So it's like which ideology do you agree with? It's actually really useful. And so,
all right. I've completely lost my voice, so I'm going to call it.
hey,
Thank
was
you for
fun.
playing. Thanks,
That was
Dilvani, for
fun.
joining me today. And
All right.
thanks to everyone who recommended this and ruined my entire day. You
Oh,
absolute.
yeah. Why are you doing political?
Yeah. All right. Anyways, have a good day. Take care. Thanks, Dilvani. Check out Dilvani's channel. It's good. Ciao.
So yeah.